Chapter 6 of Cabbages and Kings, by O. Henry. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Eric Metzler. The Phonograph and the Graft. What was this graft? Asked Johnny, with the impatience of the great public to whom tales are told. "'Tis contrary to art and philosophy to give you the information," said Keogh, calmly. "The art of narrative consists in concealing from your audience everything it wants to know until after you expose your favourite opinions on topics foreign to the subject. A good story is like a bitter pill with the sugar coating inside of it. I will begin, if you please, with a horoscope located in the Cherokee Nation, and end with a moral tune on the phonograph. Me and Henry Horsecollar brought the first phonograph to this country. Henry was a quarter-breed, quarterback Cherokee, educated East in the idioms of football, and West in contraband whiskey, and a gentleman, the same as you and me. He was easy and romping in his ways, a man about 6 foot, with a kind of rubber tire movement. Yes, he was a little man about 5'5" or 5'11". He was what you would call a medium tall man of average smallness. Henry had quit college once, and the Muscogee jail 3 times, the last named institution on account of introducing and selling whiskey in the territories. Henry Horsecollar never let any cigar stores come up and stand behind him. He didn't belong to that tribe of Indians. Henry and me met at Texarkana and figured out this phonograph scheme. He had $360 which came to him out of a land allotment in the reservation. I had run down from Little Rock on account of a distressful scene I had witnessed on the street there. A man stood on a box and passed around some gold watches, screw case, stem winders, Elgin movement, very elegant. $20 they cost you over the counter. At $3 the crowd fought for the tickers. The man happened to find a valise full of them handy, and he passed them out like putting hot biscuits on a plate. The backs were hard to unscrew, but the crowd put its ears to the case, and they ticked mollifyingly and agreeable. 3 of these watches were genuine tickers. The rest were only kickers. Hey! Why, empty cases with one of them horny black bugs that fly around electric lights in them. Them bugs kick off minutes and seconds industrious and beautiful. So this man I was speaking of cleaned up $288, and then he went away, because he knew that when it came time to wind watches in Little Rock, an entomologist would be needed, and he wasn't one. So, as I say, Henry had 360 and I had 288. The idea of introducing the phonograph to South America was Henry's, but I took to it freely, being fond of machinery of all kinds. "The Latin races," says Henry, explaining easy in the idioms he learned at college, "are peculiarly adapted to be victims of the phonograph. They have the artistic temperament. They yearn for music and color and gaiety. They give wampum to the hand-organ man and the 4-legged chicken in the tent when they're months behind with the grocery and the breadfruit tree. Then, says I, we'll export canned music to the Latins. But I'm mindful of Mr. Julius Caesar's account of 'em where he says, 'Omnia Gallia in 3 partes divisa est,' which is the same as to say, we will need all of our gall in devising means to tree them parties." I hated to make a show of education, but I was disinclined to be overdone in syntax by a mere Indian, a member of a race to which we owe nothing except the land on which the United States is situated. We bought a fine phonograph in Texarkana, one of the best make, and half a trunkful of records. We packed up and took the T&P for New Orleans. From that celebrated center of molasses and disfranchised coon songs we took a steamer for South America. We landed at Solitas, 40 miles up the coast from here. 'Twas a palatable enough place to look at. The houses were clean and white, and to look at 'em stuck around among the scenery they reminded you of hard-boiled eggs served with lettuce. There was a block of skyscraper mountains in the suburbs, and they kept pretty quiet like they had crept up there and were watching the town. And the sea was remarking shh, shh, shh on the beach, and now and then a ripe coconut would drop kerblip in the sand, and that was all there was doing. Yes, I judged that town was considerably on the quiet. I judged that after Gabriel quits blowing his horn, and the car starts, with Philadelphia swinging to the last strap, and Pine Gully, Arkansas, hanging on to the rear step, this town of Solitas will wake up and ask if anybody spoke. The captain went ashore with us, and offered to conduct what he seemed to like to call the obsequies. He introduced Henry and me to the United States consul, and a roan man, the head of the Department of Mercenary and Licentious Dispositions, the way it read upon his sign. "I touch here again a week from today," says the captain. "By that time," we told him, "we'll be amassing wealth in the interior towns with our galvanized prima donna and correct imitations of Sousa's band excavating a march from a tin mine." "You'll not," says the captain. "You'll be hypnotized. Any gentleman in the audience who kindly steps upon the stage and looks this country in the eye will be converted to the hypothesis that he's but a fly in the Elgin creamery. You'll be standing knee-deep in the surf waiting for me, and your machine for making hamburger steak out of the hitherto respected art of music will be playing 'There's No Place Like Home.'" Henry skinned a 20 off his roll, and received from the Bureau of Mercenary Dispositions a paper bearing a red seal and a dialect story, and no change. Then we got the consul full of red wine and struck him for a horoscope. He was a thin, youngish sort of man, I should say past 50, sort of French-Irish in his affections, and puffed up with disconsolation. Yes, he was a flattened kind of a man, in whom drink lay stagnant, inclined to corpulence and misery. Yes, I think he was a kind of Dutchman, being very sad and genial in his ways. "The marvelous invention," he says, entitled the phonograph, "has never invaded these shores. The people have never heard it. They would not believe it if they should. Simple-hearted children of nature, progress has never condemned them to accept the work of a can-opener as an overture, and ragtime might incite them to a bloody revolution. But you can try the experiment. The best chance you have is that the populace may not wake up when you play. There's 2 ways, says the consul, they may take it. They may become inebriated with attention, like an Atlanta colonel listening to 'Marching Through Georgia,' or they will get excited and transpose the key of the music with an axe and yourselves into a dungeon. In the latter case, says the consul, I'll do my duty by cabling to the State Department, and I'll wrap the stars and stripes around you when you come to be shot, and threaten them with the vengeance of the greatest gold export and financial reserve nation on earth. The flag is full of bullet holes now, says the consul, made in that way. Twice before, says the consul, I have cabled our government for a couple of gunboats to protect American citizens. The first time, the department sent me a pair of gum boots. The other time was when a man named Pease was going to be executed here. They referred that appeal to the Secretary of Agriculture. Let us now disturb the senor behind the bar for a subsequence of the red wine. Thus soliloquized the consul of Solitas to me and Henry Horsecollar. But, notwithstanding, we hired a room that afternoon in the Calle de Los Angeles, the main street that runs along the shore, and put our trunks there. 'Twas a good-sized room, dark and cheerful, but small. 'Twas on a various street, diversified by houses and conservatory plants. The peasantry of the city passed to and fro in the fine pasturage between the sidewalks. 'Twas, for the world, like an opera chorus when the royal Kafuzlam is about to enter. We were rubbing the dust off the machine and getting fixed to start business the next day, when a big, fine-looking white man in white clothes stopped at the door and looked in. We extended the invitations, and he walked inside and sized us up. He was chewing a long cigar, and wrinkling his eyes meditative, like a girl trying to decide which dress to wear to the party. "New York?" he says to me finally. "Originally, and from time to time," I says. "Hasn't it rubbed off yet?" "It's simple," says he, "when you know how. It's the fit of the vest. They don't cut vests right anywhere else. Coats, maybe, but not vests." The white man looks at Henry Horsecollar and hesitates. "Injun," says Henry. "Tame Injun." "Mellinger," says the man. "Homer P. Mellinger. Boys, you're confiscated. You're babes in the wood without a chaperone or referee, and it's my duty to start you going. I'll knock out the props and launch you proper in the pellucid waters of this tropical mud puddle. You'll have to be christened. And if you'll come with me, I'll break a bottle of wine across your bows, according to Hoyle." Well, for 2 days Homer P. Mellinger did the honors. That man cut ice in Anchuria. He was it. He was the Royal Kafuzlam. If me and Henry was babes in the wood, he was a robin redbreast from the topmost bough. Him and me and Henry Horsecollar locked arms, and toted that phonograph around, and had wassail and diversions. Everywhere we found doors open we went inside and set the machine going, and Mellinger called upon the people to observe the artful music and his two lifelong friends, the Señores Americanos. The opera chorus was agitated with the steam and followed us from house to house. There was a different kind of drink to be had with every tune. The natives had acquirements of a pleasant thing in the way of a drink that gums itself to the recollection. They chop off the end of a green coconut, and pour in on the juice of it French brandy and other adjuvants. We had them and other things. Mine and Henry's money was counterfeit. Everything was on Homer P. Mellinger. That man could find rolls of bills concealed in places on his person where Herman the Wizard couldn't have conjured out a rabbit or an omelette. He could have founded universities and made orchid collections, and then had enough left to purchase the colored vote of his country. Henry and me wondered what his graft was. One evening he told us. "Boys," said he, "I've deceived you. You think I'm a painted butterfly, but in fact I'm the hardest worked man in this country. 10 years ago I landed on its shores, and 2 years ago on the point of its jaw. Yes, I guess I can get the decision over this ginger cake commonwealth at the end of any round I choose. I'll confide in you because you are my countrymen and guests, even if you have assaulted my adopted shores with the worst system of noises ever set to music. My job is private secretary to the President of this republic, and my duties are running it. I'm not headlined in the bills, but I'm the mustard in the salad dressing just the same. There isn't a law goes before Congress. There isn't a concession granted. There isn't an import duty levied but what H.P. Mellinger he cooks and seasons it. In the front office I fill the president's inkstand and search visiting statesmen for dirks and dynamite. But in the back room I dictate the policy of the government. You'd never guess in the world how I got my pull. It's the only graft of its kind on earth. I'll put you wise. You remember the old top-liner in the copybook? Honesty is the best policy? That's it. I'm working honesty for a graft. I'm the only honest man in the republic. The government knows it. The people know it. The boodlers know it. The foreign investors know it. I make the government keep its faith. If a man is promised a job, he gets it. If outside capital buys a concession, it gets the goods. I run a monopoly of square dealing here. There's no competition. If Colonel Diogenes were to flash his lantern in this precinct, he'd have my address inside of 2 minutes. There isn't big money in it, but it's a sure thing, and lets a man sleep of nights." Thus Homer P. Mellinger made oration to me and Henry Horsecollar. And later he divested himself of this remark. "Boys, I'm going to hold a soiree this evening with a gang of leading citizens, and I want your assistance. You bring the musical corn sheller and give the affair the outside appearance of a function. There's important business on hand, but it mustn't show. I can talk to you people. I've been pained for years on account of not having anybody to blow off and brag to. I get homesick sometimes, and I'd swap the entire perquisites of office for just 1 hour to have a stein and a caviar sandwich somewhere on 34th Street, and stand and watch the streetcars go by, and smell the peanut roaster at old Giuseppe's fruit stand." "Yes," said I, "there's fine caviar at Billy Renfrew's cafe, corner of 34th and—" "God knows it," interrupts Mellinger. "And if you'd told me you knew Billy Renfrew, I'd have invented tons of ways of making you happy. Billy was my sidekicker in New York. There's a man who never knew what crooked was. Here I am working honesty for a graft, but that man loses money on it. Carambos! I get sick at times of this country. Everything's rotten. From the executive down to the coffee pickers, they're plotting to down each other and skin their friends. If a mule driver takes off his hat to an official, that man figures it out that he's a popular idol, and sets his pegs to stir up a revolution and upset the administration. It's one of my little chores as private secretary to smell out these revolutions and affix the kibosh before they break out and scratch the paint off the government property. That's why I'm down here now in this mildewed coast town. The governor of the district and his crew are plotting to uprise. I've got every one of their names, and they're invited to listen to the phonograph tonight. Compliments of H.P.M. That's the way I'll get them in a bunch, and things are on the program to happen to them." We three were sitting at table in the cantina of the Purified Saints. Mellinger poured out wine, and was looking some worried. I was thinking. "They're a sharp crowd," he says, kind of fretful. They're capitalized by a foreign syndicate after rubber, and they're loaded to the muzzle for bribing. I'm sick," goes on Mellinger, "of comic opera. I want to smell East River and wear suspenders again. At times I feel like throwing up my job, but I'm damn fool enough to be sort of proud of it. There's Mellinger, they say here. Por Dios, you can't touch him with $1,000,000. I'd like to take that record back and show it to Billy Renfro some day, and that tightens my grip whenever I see a fat thing that I could corral just by winking one eye, and losing my graft. By God, they can't monkey with me. They know it. What money I get I make honest and spend it. Some day I'll make a pile and go back and eat caviar with Billy. Tonight I'll show you how to handle a bunch of corruptionists. I'll show them what Mellinger, private secretary, means when you spell it with the cotton and tissue paper off." Mellinger appears shaky, and breaks his glass against the neck of the bottle. I say to myself, "White man, if I'm not mistaken, there's been a bait laid out where the tail of your eye could see it." That night, according to arrangements, me and Henry took the phonograph to a room in a 'dobe house in a dirty side street, where the grass was knee-high. 'Twas a long room, lit with smoky oil lamps. There was plenty of chairs and a table at the back end. We set the phonograph on the table. Mellinger was there, walking up and down, disturbed in his predicaments. He chewed cigars and spat 'em out, and he bit the thumbnail of his left hand. By and by the invitations to the musicale came sliding in by pairs to the threes and spade flushes. Their color was of a diversity, running from a 3 days smoked meerschaum to a patent leather polish. They were as polite as wax, being devastated with enjoyments to give Senor Mellinger the good evenings. I understood their Spanish talk. I ran a pumping engine 2 years in a Mexican silver mine, and had it pat, but I never let on. Maybe 50 of them had come, and was seated when in slid the king bee, the governor of the district. Mellinger met him at the door and escorted him to the grand stand. When I saw that Latin man I knew that Mellinger, private secretary, had all the dances on his card taken. That was a big, squashy man, the color of a rubber overshoe, and he had an eye like a head waiter's. Mellinger explained, fluent in the Castilian idioms, that his soul was disconcerted with joy at introducing to his respected friends America's greatest invention, the wonder of the age. Henry got the cue and run on an elegant brass band record, and the festivities became initiated. The governor man had a bit of English under his hat, and when the music was choked off he says, "Very fine, gracias, the American gentleman, the so splendid music as to play." The table was a long one, and Henry and me sat at the end of it next the wall. The governor sat at the other end. Homer P. Mellinger stood at the side of it. I was just wondering how Mellinger was going to handle this crowd, when the home talent suddenly opened the services. That governor man was suitable for uprisings and policies. I judge he was a ready kind of man who took his own time. Yes, he was full of attention and immediateness. He leaned his hands on the table and imposed his face toward the secretary man. "Do the American senors understand Spanish?" he asks in his native accents. "They do not," says Mellinger. "Then listen," goes on the Latin man, prompt. "The musics are of sufficient prettiness, but not of necessity. Let us speak of business. I well know why we are here, since I observe my compatriots. You had a whisper today, Senor Mellinger, of our proposals. Tonight we will speak out. We know that you stand in the president's favor, and we know your influence. The government will be changed. We know the worth of your services. We esteem your friendship and aid so much that—" Mellinger raises his hand, but the governor man bottles him up. "Do not speak until I have done." The governor man then draws a package wrapped in paper from his pocket, and lays it on the table by Mellinger's hand. "In that you will find $50,000 in money of your country. You can do nothing against us, but you can be worth that for us. Go back to the capital and obey our instructions. Take that money now. We trust you. You will find with it a paper giving in detail the work you will be expected to do for us. Do not have the unwiseness to refuse." The governor man paused, with his eyes fixed on Mellinger, full of expressions and observances. I looked at Mellinger and was glad Billy Renfrew couldn't see him then. The sweat was popping out on his forehead, and he stood dumb, tapping the little package with the ends of his fingers. The Colorado Madura gang was after his graft. He had only to change his politics, and stuff 5 fingers in his inside pocket. Henry whispers to me and wants the pause in the program interpreted. I whisper back, HP is up against a bribe, senator size, and the coons have got him going. I saw Mellinger's hand moving closer to the package. "He's weakening," I whispered to Henry. "We'll remind him," says Henry, "of the peanut roaster on 34th Street, New York." Henry stooped down and got a record from the basketful we'd brought, slid it in the phonograph, and started her off. It was a cornet solo, very neat and beautiful, and the name of it was "Home, Sweet Home." Not one of them 50-odd men in the room moved while it was playing, and the governor man kept his eyes steady on Mellinger. I saw Mellinger's head go up little by little, and his hand came creeping away from the package. Not until the last note sounded did anybody stir. And then Homer P. Mellinger takes up the bundle of boodle and slams it in the governor man's face. "That's my answer," says Mellinger, private secretary, "and there'll be another in the morning. I have proofs of conspiracy against every man of you. The show is over, gentlemen." "There's one more act," puts in the governor man. "You are a servant, I believe, employed by the president to copy letters and answer raps at the door. I am governor here. Senores, I call upon you in the name of the cause to seize this man." That brindled gang of conspirators shoved back their chairs and advanced in force. I could see where Mellinger had made a mistake in massing his enemies so as to make a grandstand play. I think he made another one, too, but we can pass that. Mellinger's idea of a graft and mine being different, according to estimations and points of view. There was only one window and door in that room, and they were in the front end. Here was 50-odd Latin men coming in a bunch to obstruct the legislation of Mellinger. You may say there were 3 of us, for me and Henry simultaneous declared New York City and the Cherokee Nation in sympathy with the weaker party. Then it was that Henry Horsecollar rose to a point of disorder and intervened, showing admirable the advantages of education as applied to the American Indian's natural intellect and native refinement. He stood up and smoothed back his hair on each side with his hands as you've seen little girls do when they play. "Get behind me, both of you," says Henry. "What's it to be, Chief?" I asked. "I'm going to buck center," says Henry in his football idioms. "There isn't a tackle in the lot of them. Follow me close and rush the game." Then that cultured red man exhaled an arrangement of sounds with his mouth that made the Latin aggregation pause, with thoughtfulness and hesitations. The matter of his proclamation seemed to be a cooperation of the Carlisle war whoop with the Cherokee College yell. He went at the chocolate team like a bean out of a little boy's nigger shooter. His right elbow laid out the governor man on the gridiron, and he made a lane the length of the crowd so wide that a woman could have carried a stepladder through it without striking against anything. All Mellinger and me had to do was to follow. It took us just 3 minutes to get out of that street around to military headquarters, where Mellinger had things his own way. A colonel and a battalion of bare-toed infantry turned out and went back to the scene of the musicale with us, but the conspirator gang was gone. But we recaptured the phonograph with honors of war, and marched back to the cuartel with it playing "All Coons Look Alike to Me." The next day Mellinger takes me and Henry to one side, and begins to shed 10s and 20s. "I want to buy that phonograph," says he. "I like that last tune it played at the soiree." "This is more money than the machine is worth," says I. "'Tis government expense money," says Mellinger. "The government pays for it, and it's getting the tune grinder cheap." Me and Henry knew that pretty well. We knew that it had saved Homer P. Mellinger's graft when he was on the point of losing it. But we never let him know we knew it. "Now you boys better slide off further down the coast for a while," says Mellinger, "till I get the screws put on these fellows here. If you don't, they'll give you trouble. And if you ever happen to see Billy Renfrew again before I do, tell him I'm coming back to New York as soon as I can make a stake. Honest." Me and Henry lay low until the day the steamer came back. When we saw the captain's boat on the beach, we went down and stood on the edge of the water. The captain grinned when he saw us. "I told you you'd be waiting," he says. "Where's the hamburger machine?" "It stays behind," I says, "to play 'Home, Sweet Home.'" "I told you so," says the captain again. "Climb in the boat." And that, said Keogh, is the way me and Henry Horsecollar introduced the phonograph into this country. Henry went back to the States, but I've been rummaging around in the tropics ever since. They say Mellinger never traveled a mile after that without his phonograph.
I guess it kept him reminded about his graft whenever he saw the siren voice of the boodler tip him the wink with a bribe in its hand." "I suppose he's taking it home with him as a souvenir," remarked the consul. "Not as a souvenir," said Keogh. "He'll need 2 of 'em in New York, running day and night."
Chapter 7. Albuquerque, New Mexico, United States of America.